Today's scripture looks at the story of Jairus. When I was a little girl, it was my favorite because it's one of the few stories in the Bible that's actually about a little girl. It took me a number of years to kind of look at it a little more deeply, look at what was going on. I mean, first of all, she never gets a name of her own, so she's actually just as much of a pawn, I guess, or a prop, maybe more accurately, as other children in the scripture. But she's part of a larger story. And we look at the Gospel of Mark today, and we're looking at the story of two women, Jairus' daughter and another unnamed woman who had a hemorrhage. Both of them had have the number 12 associated with them. Now, even liberal readers will read that as an actual number, forgetting how significant the number 12 was in the Hebrew culture of Jesus' day. It's not that the little girl was actually 12 or that the woman had a hemorrhage. I mean, it could happen. But the fact that they're both given the number 12 tips us off to that there's more going on in this story. It's not just simply a story of some people who want Jesus to fix them because they understand that he can do great and wonderful things. Because, I mean, Jesus already has rock star status by the time this story takes place. It's that 12 signifies the wholeness of God, the completeness of God, the presence of God. And we cannot do this story without understanding the presence of God in it. So we start the story where Jesus is in town. The one of the members of the synagogue, one of the workers there, comes to him, which kind of signals that not all people in the temple were having problems with him. Sorry, I misspoke. It wasn't synagogue, it was temple. Not all people had problems with him. He had problems with the elite, but he didn't have problems with everybody that was there. Came to him begging him to help his daughter. Then we have the story of the woman with the hemorrhage. Came to him, touched him, because socially she's not allowed to actually go and talk to him because of this hemorrhage that she has. What we have here is two stories of belief, two stories of faith, two stories of people who are so at the end of their rope that this is their choice. This is what they have left. It's a wonderful metaphor for us as Christians to understand how we're to relate to Jesus, how Jesus relates to us, how God is present in our lives. This is a story of faith, of belief. And that word belief, gets thrown around a lot. What actually does it mean in a Christian context? For so many of us growing up, we were told just believe something as if it's something we could choose to do, and then we wouldn't have to face the reality that the adults we maybe asked questions of who gave us that answer didn't really know any other answers. They weren't educated enough in the faith, or they didn't have their own beliefs. They didn't have their own ability to pass on the conclusions that they had come to. Belief is a choice. There's no two ways about it. You do that, but it's also a practice. And that is something that is really, really hard to get used to. Having faith in something means letting go of our control. And that is perhaps the hardest thing we can do as people, as humans, certainly as Christians. These two people, Jairus and the woman with a hemorrhage, they were at the end of the rope. They had tried everything else. Belief was not their first step. The woman with a hemorrhage, we're told she went through doctor after doctor. She went for a dozen years without finding any answers. Jairus, again, would have been a very important person in the community. He could have gotten doctors and everybody involved, and he probably did. But there was nothing they could do. The story isn't even about a healing, really. I mean, that's the benefit for sure. But the story is about these two people finally, when nothing else was there, coming before Jesus, coming before the incarnate God and saying, please help me. I have nothing else, no other choices to make. That is often when we do reach out, when we do have faith, when we do realize there's nothing else in our world to turn to but God. But We're a typical species. We like to have control. We like to know what we're doing. We like to know that we have power over our beings. And perhaps the hardest lesson of all is to learn when we don't. It usually happens in a crisis, when everything has fallen apart, when we might not know where to turn to. But here's the thing, it's not just God that we get to turn to. We are commissioned as people of faith, as followers of Jesus. And I'm not necessarily talking about people who even show up at church and sit in a pew. I'm talking about the people who have chosen Jesus' behavior, his lifestyle, his teachings as the way we want to live our lives. We are commissioned through that act of choice to follow and do as Jesus asked his closest followers to do. Another use of the number 12, God being present. We are the ones that are also able to be part of that healing that Jairus and this woman needed so desperately. Yeah, they were healed. Were they cured? Doesn't really matter. They were made whole. And that is what healing meant in the Hebrew scriptures, in the Jewish scriptures, the Christian scriptures. It was a reconciling with God. It was a wholeness of being. Everybody's still going to die. Doesn't matter how you try to cheat it. None of us are ever healed completely to the point where death is not an option. But in the process of faith, in the process of asking for help, and that's another part of the story, these two people did not suffer silently. They asked for help. That is part of our belief structure. It's not just enough for us to sit in a room and pray and believe things are going to happen. We also have to take action. We have to ask. We have to let those around know what our need is. One of the reasons this website was in hiatus for a little bit was because there's so much change going on in my life. You'll notice the new backdrop. I think it's much more attractive than what I was using. But I'm able to do it now because I've moved. And I needed help. And I needed people around me. And I needed to believe that they would be there. And part of my faith in God is my faith in people to be God's hands and feet. People's beliefs, their faith, includes their faith in us being those hands and feet. Not standing in judgment, not standing back and saying you did this to yourself, not saying, oh, well, it's beyond my ability to fix. People who do a little bit, and then they add up, and they do a little bit more, and other people contribute as well. See, Jesus didn't put us in isolation. Jesus didn't say, just be in relationship with me and that's all you needed. Jesus put us in community. The number 12 that pops up, it's reminding us that God is part of everything we do. If we do it with love, if we do it with justice and compassion and awareness, do our little piece, we're actually part of the faith that other people have in us and through us in a larger being, in God. Jesus led by example, but he wasn't the only one who could bring healing. And healing was not just fixing the body, but it was also fixing the soul. When we are part of a community of belief, a community of faith, a community of reassurance, a community of support, we are living that world where God is in us, and we then can be there for others. It is as crucially important as our relationship through prayer. We have that gift. We talk a lot in the faith about the real point in Jesus coming was to show us how to bring God about in this world. In the story of Jairus and the woman who had a flow of blood, we have examples of how the community around, how asking, how making our needs known brings about an environment where faith and belief can be nurtured and grow. Jesus might have done the work, but he didn't do it alone. When the woman with the hemorrhage touched his cloak, he was in a community. He was surrounded by people. His followers, of course, the closest ones, didn't get it, and they often didn't. he felt energy going out of him, that energy that is shared among the community. When he went into the bedroom after the neighbors had said that Jairus' daughter was dead, he took his closest followers and her parents in. It wasn't him doing it alone. All he did was reach out and touch her and say, "Get up." Yeah, it's miraculous, and we don't want to downplay that, but it was also done in love, in community, in people being there. Our belief in each other is connected to our belief in God. There is nothing that separates us. There is nothing that denies us access to the divine. All we have to do is ask. Ask each other, ask God, ask our faith communities. Be present for each other. And when we are asked, step up to the best of what we can do. When I was in crisis, I asked for help and I received it. Didn't receive it from everybody. It kind of hurt to see some of the people who did not give me support, but at least I knew that wasn't a place to go anymore. But I asked for help and I received it. Our belief is in a God so great that the community around us is the embodied presence. We believe in Jesus incarnate for a reason. We understand that God can be in us. So bring your faith. You might get healed. You might get cured for a while. You might get bowled over by the love and generosity you feel. You might finally get completeness. But bring your faith, voice it, ask for your needs, bring it to the community, bring it in prayer. Trust that God is in everything. And in that trust, realize that God is there in the last moment. When we need God, God is there. God is always there. Trust that God will be made known through those who support you. But ask, believe, have faith, trust.